Well, good morning. Here we are. We meet again 3 times in 24 hours. What are the odds of that? Wow. I'm just going to sit here and let you look at 2 of the most beautiful things that you've ever seen. Arenal Volcano, Sean Stacey. So let's see who all's on. Good morning, Miss Dawn, Elder Barbara, Miss Cornelia, Miss Stephanie, Miss Pamela Anderson, Miss Tanya Parker. Now, I will say this, guys. If y'all can behave in the comments today, we've got a moderator with us today that's kind of strict. So if you're getting out of hand, they're going to shut you down and ban you from the page. So just make sure you keep it all kosher. Good morning, Miss Sharon Williams, who refuses to comment, but I can still see you're watching. Good morning, Hawaii. Good guess, but wrong. Anyone else have any guesses before we get started and we're waiting for people to jump in? You are allowed to take a guess of where we are today. Good morning, Miss Gail. Good to have you. If anyone knows where we are today, I will buy you lunch. I will send you money via Cash App, Venmo, Zelle, something. If you can guess it, then you get lunch on me. Caden, you only get one guess. You're out of it. Anyone else? While y'all are guessing and Googling, I will go over some announcements. D groups started last week and they are still running. You are welcome to join in on those. We've got lots of good ones from Pastor Ryan's teaching the Faith Bible School from Rhema. Venezuela, wrong again. Sharon Williams is teaching, what is she teaching? Fiji, good guess, but no. Rebecca, do you remember what she's teaching? Aren't you in that class? Hearing the voice of God. That's a good one. Someone asked me last night, how do I hear the voice of God? Go to the D group class. What up? Speaking in tongues. Miss Karen Lorenz is teaching on speaking in tongues. And there's several other good ones. Baby dedications. Peru, no. Y'all are getting close. Y'all are doing good. Y'all are guessing all the countries that have mountains. Baby dedications. This Sunday, you need to email Jen so we can get that on there. So email her. Do you have her email address over there? Hearing the voice of God. Thanks, Mom. Can you answer? No, Pastor Carl, you can't answer. Good morning, Heath. Good to see you. Hawaii, no. There we go. There's Jen's email address right above me, kind of cutting my hair off. Guam, no. Y'all are doing great, though. All places I need to go visit. Jennifer Lopez, email her if you have a baby that needs to be dedicated. Also, if you have a senior, do y'all know that we have all the seniors? Or are there some that might still be out there? There's some. Okay. So if you have a graduating senior that is graduating from high school this year, please email Pastor Caro today so that we can get the stuff we need from them and recognize them and honor them. So if that's you, Vanuatu, nope. Please email Pastor Caro. We have Momentum Conference coming up with Evangelist Ted Shuttlesworth. That is June 13th through 16th. VBS, July 5th, 6th, and 7th from 9 a.m. to 12. And if you are available to volunteer, please, again, email Jen. Also, Scarlet Ladies Conference, July 8th and 9th with Evangelist Adalis Shuttlesworth. So no one has gotten it. No one knows where we are this morning. Those of you that just hopped on, I promised free lunch. I will Cash App you, Zelle you. I'll give you a hint. It's an active volcano currently now. Hey, Pastor Ryan. Good day to you. Aren't you in service? Are you watching live stream while in a live service? My mom could probably answer, but she keeps hopping off then hopping back on. So good morning, Miss Marilyn White. Boom, you win. How did you win? You're no church in the city. You're already disqualified. It's not church in the city. All right, well, the Congo, no. Well, we will get started, I guess. And if y'all have any answers while we're teaching, if you have any questions about what we talked about yesterday, coming out of Egypt, what we talked about last night, great faith understands authority, or about poverty, how God feels about poverty, what the Bible says about money, any of that kind of stuff, you can type your question in the comments, and Rebecca will make sure I see it, and we will get to it. So today I wanted to kind of continue what we'd been talking about on Thursdays, just how God feels about money. What does the Bible tell us about poverty, about provision, all of that kind of stuff. So today I want to look at what the Bible says about poverty. So some of the definitions of poverty: the state of being poor, lack of the means of providing material needs or comforts. Listen to this one. Unproductiveness. That means not being fruitful. Infertility is another definition of poverty. Good morning, Q. I've promised people lunch if they can guess where we are at today. So go ahead and take a guess. So here's another definition. Poverty is a state or condition in which a person or community lacks the financial resources and essentials for a minimum standard of living. Poverty means that the income level from employment is so low that basic human needs can't be met. Poverty-stricken people and families might go without proper housing, clean water, healthy food, and medical attention. Each nation may have its own threshold that determines how many of its people are living in poverty. Holland, no. Good morning, Miss Lowe. Mount Fiji, no. Y'all are doing good. You'll get there one day. Pastor Carl, we're going to keep this background up for weeks until people can guess it. You know because I told you.
I knew before this.
No.
My sister went.
Japan, no. All right, so those are some definitions of poverty. And if we look at the Word of God, if you look at the character of God, do we think that He wants any of us to go without? Do we think that He actually wants us to have a subpar standards of living to where we don't have access to clean water, to a roof over our head, to healthy food? It doesn't make sense to even just look at the character of God and the Word throughout, and anyone can say that He would want us in poverty. It just doesn't make sense. No, not Finland. Western Hemisphere. Well, I'll give you that much. Western Hemisphere. All right. So let's go to Matthew 22. I was reading this morning, and I couldn't leave it out, and it fits. It's really good. So we're going to go Matthew 22, verses 1 through 14. Matthew 22, 1 through 14. And this kind of like goes into what we were talking about yesterday as well. Jesus also told them other parables. He said, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a king who prepared a great wedding feast for his son. When the banquet was ready, he sent his servants to notify those who were invited, but they all refused to come. And this is kind of like it's a parable about salvation. Ecuador, you're getting close. In here, you see that God gave salvation to Israel, and they rejected it. They refused to come to the banquet. So he goes on, verse 4. So he sent other servants to tell them, the feast has been prepared. The bulls and the fatted cattle have been killed, and everything is ready. Come to the banquet. So this is Jesus saying, look, I've given you salvation. I've given you the promised land, just like we talked about yesterday morning. Step out of Egypt. Come and possess what I have given you. The fatted calf, the best of all meat to them. The fatted calf has been killed and prepared for you. Everything is ready. Step into the promised land. Step out of slavery. Step out of poverty and into provision. Come to the banquet. But the guests he had invited ignored them and went their own way. One to his farm, another to his business. Others seized his messengers, insulted them, and killed them. So we have to understand right here, God has prepared a feast for us. He's prepared a feast for everyone. It's just up to us to accept that invitation of salvation. Once we accept that invitation of salvation, we have access to the fatted calf. We have access to the banquet. We have access to the fancy table and the decor and all of that. But what the other thing right here, it says, but the guests he had invited ignored them and went their own way, one to his farm and another to his business. So many people give up the right to be at a banquet, the right to have the possessions, and go back into Egypt because of the affairs of this life, because of money, because of relationship, because of work, because of all these things. They decide to walk away from the provision that God has for them. The king was furious, and he sent out his army to destroy the murderers and burn down their town. And he said to his servants, the wedding feast is ready, and the guests I invited aren't worthy of the honor. Notice he compares those that reject his invitation to the feast as murderers. He calls them murderers. The wedding feast is ready, and the guests I invited aren't worthy of the honor. So when we reject his invitation, when we decide not to walk in the possessions that he gave us, we've got some cheaters on board now. Costa Rica, yes. Now, if you can name it, is it just me or is the volume quiet? Well, I'm talking normal, and we checked the mic, so I'm assuming it's your device. The wedding feast is ready, and the guests I invited aren't worthy of the honor. Now go out to the street corners and invite everyone you see. So the servants brought in everyone they could find, good and bad alike, and the banquet hall was filled with guests. So we see even right there, St. Vincent, no, Miss Dolores, good morning. Who all got it? I saw Tammy. Tammy, you have no way for me to send you money. I've told you to work on this. Jackie, did anyone else get it up? No? Okay, just those two. God is prepared. Yeah, so look, God, I was reading it this morning and it just hit me. This is exactly what we were talking about yesterday, is stepping out of Egypt, coming out of Egypt, out of slavery and into the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey, a land of provision. And it hit me this morning as I'm reading the parable of the great banquet. And it hit me that it's the same thing, that he's taken us out of that. And he's given us the fatted calf. He's already prepared it for us. All we have to do is accept it. A fatted calf and a banquet is not a symbol of poverty. How many of you have seen weddings that are done at the district of the, or what is it, the DOJ's office? What is that? No, I don't know. Anyways, just right in front of a judge. But then there's other weddings that they spend $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 on a wedding, and it's beautiful. God has great banquets for us. That is not poverty. Yes, sound is great. We have Miss Elder Barbara. We have other people saying sound is good, so I would just try turning up your device. All right, Genesis 1:28 says this. What's the Western Hemisphere? It's the western side of the globe. Genesis 1:28. Then God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and multiply." What was one of the definitions of poverty? Unproductiveness, being unfruitful. Caden, you're a little low. Being unfruitful. But the first command God gave us is be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and govern it. So he tells us to be fruitful and multiply, and then he goes on and says, reign over it. Reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the animals. So he gives us a command to be fruitful. Then he tells us that we have dominion over the earth in the same sentence. Matthew 7:17 through 20. Matthew 17:17 through 20. A good tree produces fruit. Produces good fruit. A bad tree produces bad fruit. A good tree can't produce bad fruit, and a bad tree can't produce good fruit. So every tree that does not produce good fruit is chopped down and thrown into the fire. Yes, just as you can identify a tree by its fruit, so you can identify people by their actions. All right, so let's elaborate on this a little bit. The same way you can identify a tree by its fruit, you can identify people by his actions, is what the word is telling us. Good fruit. Poverty is not a good fruit. How many of you, by a show of hands, would like to live in poverty? How many of you would like to not have enough money to pay your bills? You wouldn't like to have enough money to be able to bless your children and your grandchildren? I would bet that that's no one. Hello, Gwen from Malawi. Thank you for joining us. So we can see here, if we use the word to interpret the word, that poverty is not what God desires for us. He desires for us to produce fruit in every area of our lives. Matthew 3, verse 10. Matthew 3, verse 10. Even now the axe of God's judgment is poised, ready to sever the roots of the trees. Yes, every tree that does not produce good fruit will be chopped down and thrown into the fire. Pastor Carl, there we go. Even now, the axe of God's judgment is poised. We were just making sure you're paying attention. The axe of God's judgment is poised, ready to sever the roots of the tree. Yes, every tree that does not produce good fruit will be chopped down and thrown into the fire. The devil tries extremely hard to keep you from producing fruit in areas of your life. He attacks wombs. He attacks people he tries to prevent people from having children. He attacks people's finances to make it to where they're not being a blessing to others. They're always striving and struggling to make more money because they're not having their needs met. He attacks families, tries to rip apart to where they're not producing good children that are going to produce fruit. Healthy marriages produce healthy children, which produce good fruit. He tries to attack the call of God on people's lives so that they don't sow the word into others. How many people do you know that have come to you and said, oh, I feel called of God to go into ministry, to go into missions, to whatever it is, and then constantly they're getting distracted by a job, a relationship, whatever it is, because the devil wants to keep them from producing fruit. He wants to keep you in a state of poverty. He wants to keep you from pouring into others. He wants to keep you from being a blessing to others. He knows that as long as he can do that, then the more rule and reign he can have on this earth. Deuteronomy 15. Deuteronomy 15, 4 through 6. There should be no poor among you. That right there says it all. That right there tells us how God feels about poverty and lack. There should be no poor among you, for the Lord your God will greatly bless you in the land which he is giving you as a special possession. You will receive this blessing if you are careful to obey all the commands of the Lord your God that I am giving you today. The Lord your God will bless you as he has promised. You will lend money to many nations, but will never need to borrow. You will rule many nations, but they will not rule over you. Right there it says it. There should be no poor among us. God's desire, what does John 10:10 say? I have come to give you life and life more abundantly. Abundantly just doesn't mean just enough. Abundantly means excessive, more than enough. Leviticus 19, verse 9 and 10. Leviticus 19, 9 and 10. When you harvest the crops of your land, listen to this. This is important. Do not harvest the grain along the edges of your fields, and do not pick up what the harvesters drop. It is the same with your grape crop. Do not strip every last bunch of grapes from the vine, and do not pick up the grapes that fall onto the ground. Leave them for the poor and the foreigners living among you. I am the Lord your God. So he's saying, look, don't worry about the little bits. Don't worry about when I tell you to give to the poor. You'll have plenty left over. He's telling us to leave some for the poor, to give to the poor. How can we do that if we ourselves are poor? If we don't have enough to get by, and we're scrounging every dollar that comes in, then how do we have enough to give to other people? Leviticus 23, verse 22. When you harvest the crops of your land, do not harvest the grain along the edges of your field, and do not pick up what the harvesters drop. Leave it for the poor and the foreigners living among you. I am the Lord your God. Deuteronomy 15, back in that chapter, a few verses later, verse 7 through 11. But if, what does if mean? That means like there may be and there may not be, right? But if there are any poor Israelites in your towns when you arrive, so that's casting into doubt that there are any poor. When you arrive in the land the Lord your God is giving you, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted towards them. Instead, be generous and lend them whatever they need. Do not be mean-spirited. So the other thing is that when you read this, God's speaking to you as if you're not poor. Because he said, if there are any poor among you, don't be hard-hearted. Don't be tight-fisted. Don't be greedy. Don't be afraid to give them something. Or refuse someone a loan because the year of canceling debts is close at hand. If you refuse to make the loan and the needy person cries out to the Lord, you will be considered guilty of sin. Give generously to the poor, not grudgingly, for the Lord your God will bless you in everything you do. There will always be some in the land who are poor. That's why I'm commanding you to share freely with the poor and with other Israelites in need. So he's commanding you to share with the poor. How can you share with yourself? That would already be yours. So he's speaking to you as though you are not poor. You've got to look at the way God looks at you. God does not see you as poor. He sees you as abundant. He sees you as blessed, overflowing. That's the way God looks at you, and that's the way we have to look at ourselves. He does not want us to be in poverty. He does not desire for us to be poor. That is not his plan. That is the enemy's plan. That is the devil's plan. 1 Timothy 6, 17 and through 19. Out of the NASB. I say that quietly under my breath. Instruct those who are rich in this present world not to be conceited or to set their hope on uncertainty of riches, but on God. So see right here, he's saying, instruct those that are rich. So he desires for those that are rich to come to know him, to be his family, who richly supply us with all things to enjoy. So right here, look at this. It says that God who richly supplies us with all things to enjoy. If you're in poverty, if you're poor, you don't have things to enjoy. You're barely scraping by. God desires for us to have things that we enjoy. Instruct them to do good. Be rich in good works. Be generous and ready to share, storing up for themselves the treasure of a good foundation for the future, so that they may take a hold of that which is truly life. Luke 14, verses 13 and 14. This goes back to the first scripture that I shared about the parable of the great banquet. But whenever you give a banquet, that would mean that you have the resources to give a banquet. Invite people who are poor, who have disabilities, who are limping, and people who are blind, and you will be blessed, since they do not have the means to repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of righteousness. Over and over and over and over, we see here that God instructs us to give to the poor. How can we give to the poor if we ourselves are poor? God does not desire for us to be poor. He does not desire for us to be in poverty. One of the very definitions was unproductiveness. Through the first half, we saw many scriptures where he commands us to be fruitful. There are many scriptures throughout the word that tell us that if we are unfruitful, he will cut us off from the kingdom of God. So he desires for us to be fruitful, which is the opposite of poverty. He desires for us to have abundant life. Poverty is not of God, and it is not for us. And honestly, that is all I have this morning, because I have kicked this thing in the teeth for a month now, and if you didn't get it over the month, sorry. But The word says over and over and over that he does not desire for us to be poor. He actually desires for us to give to the poor. That he desires for us to have abundant life, to have things that we enjoy. So since we're done so early, we'll see. Oof, that would have been bad. If any of you are brave enough to ask a question, and Jackie, send me your Cash App or Zelle, and I will send you lunch money. So if there are any questions, you can type them in the comments while we were waiting on questions. If you can put the giving information up. You can always sow right there, citcdallas.com/giving. Text to give 972-848-6005. And I was having fun with people last night. I was actually surprised. I was asking people to raise their hands. I wish Pastor Ryan was still listening because this is funny. He would laugh at this. I was asking in service last night when we were doing the offering how many people give online, and a bunch of people raised their hands. How many people give by text? A bunch of people raised their hands. How many people still give an envelope? A bunch of people raised their hands. But then I was asking simple things like how many of you want to be healed, and no one raised their hands. So that's good, though. I mean, right? That means everyone last night was giving, and none of them were sick. That's a good thing. So if you have any questions, comments, testimonies, type them in the comments quickly. And we'll just hang out and look at the two most beautiful things on the planet. So while you're doing that, this is Arenal Volcano in Costa Rica, my favorite place on the planet. We had the opportunity to stay at a hotel where that was literally our view, not that close, and it would have been, I guess, the opposite side of the volcano. But beautiful, beautiful place. Everyone should go, travel the world. God has beautiful things all over the world. I was rewatching, I like to watch nature shows right before bed, especially if I can, what's his name? The guy with like the most calm voice in the planet. Oh man, I just went blank. Anyways, I like watching nature shows right before bed because awesome. They help me like shut my mind down for the day. And so I was rewatching Aerial Africa, or Africa from the Air, whatever it is, whichever one. And just watching about Botswana. We are actually last night watching the one about the Okavango Delta, which is what we had up. When did we have that up? Last week? Was that up last week? Sorry, I can't barely see your face with all these lights. I feel like I'm at a stadium. Does obedience hinder being prosperous? Absolutely. Absolutely it does. I mean, it goes along with what we were talking about last night about great faith understands authority. Being prosperous is the same way. I mean, all of God's promises are conditional. All of God. I've watched Wild Earth. I like it. All of God's promises are conditional on being obedient to his word. So, yes, absolutely. I mean, the very beginnings of being prosperous start in Malachi 3, in the tithe and the offering. If you're not doing the tithe and offering, then you can't be prosperous. That's the baby step, the entrance step to prosperity, is making sure you're tithing and offering. I mean, in fact, that's what he calls them out on. He says, you are robbing God because they weren't being obedient. David Attenborough. I could watch anything with his voice. David Attenborough, the most soothing voice on the planet. Is he still alive? Someone Google for me if he's still alive. David Attenborough. If he is, he's got to be like 98. He's 95? He's still alive? Awesome. Mr. Attenborough, if you're watching, if any family members of Mr. Attenborough are watching, please, before you pass on from this earth, please do some voiceovers for many more nature shows before you go on, to leave us all with such a great legacy and blessing. You're a blessing to many people around the world. We love you. And if I had your Cash App, I'd send you lunch money too. You probably don't need it, but. Any other questions before I hop off here? Bob Ross, Quiet Painter. Any other questions, comments? That was a good question, Joel. I'll give you a few more seconds. Anything else I need to announce, Pastor Cotto? Offices will be closed Monday, Memorial Day. I'll also go ahead and say this. This Sunday is our pastor's 51st wedding anniversary. So just go ahead. This gives you, what's today? Thursday, Friday, like 3 or 4 days to prepare a seed to sow into them, to bless them for their anniversary. So just be prepared, and when you get here on Sunday, if the Lord tells you to do that, you can write that in the blank spot, write pastor's anniversary, and we will get that to them. Other than that, I guess y'all have no more questions. Pam, what station is that show on? So that is it for today. He's 95. Thank you, Miss Dolores. Love you guys. We will see you in an hour and a half for prayer. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed today's service. You can always rewatch this message on our Facebook and YouTube archives. Download our podcast app to hear other messages like this one. We love you, and we hope you have a great week. Follow us on social media at CITC Dallas on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For more information about what's going on in church in the city, visit our website at citcdallas.com.